Democrats of the 1960s brought an optimistic and active approach to problems. And this extends not only to domestic policy, as we've looked at, but into foreign policy as well. JFK rejected the rigidity of John Foster Dulles' massive retaliation, the idea that if there was a problem, we would just launch a nuclear war. And he focused instead on countries emerging from colonialism, countries that had been historically controlled by European powers. Under Kennedy, we create, promote, I guess, we put more effort into the Green Berets. This is a special forces unit that is designed to go into countries that are perhaps teetering on the brink of going communist or pro-democracy. And the Green Berets would go in there and organize resistance or train people to do what they had to do. But we also pushed non-military solutions. The Alliance for Progress developed and stabilized Latin America and tried to help try to stop that part of the country or the world from siding with the Soviets. The Agency for International Development coordinated foreign aid, the idea being that if you're getting foreign aid from America, maybe you're unwilling to side with the Soviets. And famously, Kennedy institutes the Peace Corps, which are basically American college-age kids going around the world and trying to help people in developing countries as an idea of promoting the American way of life and American values. The Peace Corps is actually a Cold War strategy to stop countries from siding with the Soviets. JFK inherited an operation called the Bay of Pigs. This had been planned under Eisenhower, and JFK was briefed on it and chose to allow it to go forward, so the two kind of share responsibility. It was a CIA operation to send ex-Cubans into Cuba to start a revolution to overthrow the communist Fidel Castro. We land about 2,000 of these Cuban expatriates on April 17th of 1961. We've promised them U.S. air support, but the amphibious invasion is such a disaster. The U.S. air support doesn't even engage; we never show up, and we leave these Cubans stranded on the beach. Castro had been expecting them. There was no revolution. Nobody rises up against Castro. And JFK initially denies that the Americans have any involvement, claiming that this was something these folks did on their own. But then later it becomes revealed that it was an American CIA operation to try to unseat Castro. In June of 1961, JFK and Nikita Khrushchev, the new premier of the Soviet Union, meet in Vienna. Khrushchev threatens to nuke America over the Berlin issue. The Soviets are so very angry that there's this island of democracy in the Soviet Germany, Soviet-controlled Germany. Khrushchev is angry about the flood of immigrants who are leaving East Berlin and going to West Berlin, and then oftentimes flying out from there to Western countries. And so overnight, with really no warning at all, on August 13th of 1961, the Berlin Wall is erected. Literally, people go to bed one night and it's not there, and they get up in the morning and it's already significantly underway to being completed. The Soviets begin to shoot people trying to cross from one side of Berlin to the other. And this wall, this divided city, becomes a symbol of the Cold War for the next 30 years. And I can tell you, as somebody who was around when it was around, it was very large in our imagination. It was really a physical embodiment of the struggle between the East and the West. All of this will lead to the closest we ever come to the end of the world. Movies and TV shows and comic books are always talking about the end of the world. The closest we've ever actually come to that is in 1962. That summer, American spy satellites show evidence that the Soviets are putting nuclear weapons in Cuba. And of course, this is very alarming to Americans because Cuba's, about 60 miles off the coast of Florida, very close to America. On October 17th, color pictures of the missile silos are turned over to the government. The Soviets saw this as reasonable. America had missiles in Turkey, which was right on the Soviet border, so it only seemed normal to them that they would be able to put missiles near our border. But JFK draws a line in the sand, and he says that if the Soviets go on with their plan to try to put these missiles in Cuba, then it's going to lead to a nuclear war. On October 22nd, our Navy blockades Cuba. Our Navy sits around Cuba and refuses to let Soviet ships through. And the world holds its breath for 4 days. At one point, a Russian ship charges the blockade and then stops and turns and goes back. But at that moment, it becomes very possible that we could have a nuclear war. My dad was in middle school in Midland, Texas, and they called all the kids into the gym on one of those October days and told them they were going to send them home early so they could be with their family, in case the world ended. But this is what it was like those 4 days. Everybody sat around and wondered, very realistically, is this it? Is this the end? Ultimately, on October 26, JFK intentionally, Bobby Kennedy, intentionally misreads a Khrushchev message that was worded ambiguously and agrees to pull the missiles out of Turkey in exchange for the Soviets not putting missiles in Cuba. But part of the deal is that nobody can know we agreed to that. Kennedy doesn't want to look weak for having negotiated with the communists. And so it's a secret deal. Of course, now we know about it. And the next year, in 1963, we signed a nuclear test ban treaty. When LBJ becomes president, he's attacked for his lack of international experience. He has a long and storied career as a senator, but he doesn't have any real international experience. And so he wants to prove he's a strong leader. In 1961, when the leader of the Dominican Republic, Trujillo, is killed, it begins a 4-year civil war in the Dominican. In the spring of 1965, the conservative government there collapses in favor of a Soviet-leaning government led by Juan Bosch. LBJ claims that Bosch is a Castro puppet, which is not true, but we think that anyway. And we send 30,000 American troops, we put the Civil War down, and we oversee elections in that country in 1966, and we ensure that a conservative, pro-democratic candidate wins those elections. But the truth is, Vietnam had come to dominate all American thoughts of foreign policy even before LBJ is elected.